This year at the New Zealand International Film Festival, I selected 3 films with queer themes: Enzo, Plainclothes, and Twinless. Each of them has its own instinct style, yet all, in their own way, explore love, struggle, and solitude within queer lives. In this episode, I'd like to share my reflections on these films and explain why they left such a strong impression on me. If you are curious about how cinema can encourage us to reconsider love and identity, then please stay with me. 欢迎来到云游记 Welcome to Journey of the Cloud Walker. Recently, I went to see a film, not one of those heavily promoted blockbusters, but a French film shown at this year's New Zealand International Film Festival, Enzo, directed by Robin Campello. To be honest, I hadn't heard a word about it beforehand. I was simply flicking through the program, and on a whim, clicked on the trailer when the title caught my eye. And the moment I watched it, well, it struck a chord. Quiet, understated, neither wallowing in misery nor trying too hard to be artsy. Rather like a cup of warm tea, no extravagant spices, yet smooth on the palate with a lingering aftertaste. At that moment, I decided, this one I must watch in the cinema. As for where the screening took place, I shall keep that to myself. A touch of mystery never hurts. In any case, I went along that day, and the atmosphere was just right. Not long into the film, one word surfaced in my mind: youth. Truly, that vitality, that awkward freshness, that sense of closeness tinged with unease, it was all captured so vividly. The story centers on Enzo, a 16-year-old boy. It's an age that is particularly fascinating. Call him a child, and he has already begun forming his own ideas. Call him an adult, and there is still so much he doesn't know. The film contains hardly any dramatic twists. Instead, it feels as though we spent a summer alongside him. Moments of intensity, confusion, silence, and tentative exploration. The director cleverly translates the texture of youth into human interactions and body language. When Enzo gazes at someone, his eyes flit away for the briefest instant. When walking beside another, his shoulder drifts closer, then suddenly apart. Such details move you more deeply than any dialogue could. A pivotal character in this film is Vlad, a young man of Ukrainian heritage. He's layered and nuanced, revealing different sides of himself depending on whom he's with. Among fellow countrymen, his tone and posture convey familiarity and safety. With Enzo, he softens, part caretaker, part observer, and when facing Enzo's father, he adopts a more grounded, slightly guarded demeanor. This switching is both major and an instinct for survival in a complex world. The Ukrainian element adds particular weight. Against the backdrop of the real war, that identity carries a quiet sadness, intensifying the emotions beneath the surface. Even if viewers do not consciously think of politics, they can still feel the undercurrent of displacement and ruthlessness. The relationship between Enzo and Vlad, to my mind, is a textbook example of temporary attachment. Enzo, still navigating self-discovery, seeks an emotional anchor, and Vlad happens to provide it, be it in care or in understanding. One scene stands out starkly. Enzo lies to his father, claiming Vlad assaulted him. The whole cinema drew a sharp breath, only for him to confess moments later that he had fabricated it. To me, this was not malice, but a rebellious testing of adolescence, pushing parental boundaries, wielding exaggeration, even dangerous ones, to assert control over the narrative. The film's visual style and sound design are equally refined. The summer light burns across the screen with a heated texture, yellows and oranges exuding restlessness, soothed by blues of water and night. The camera's distance speaks. Close-ups dominate his scenes with Vlad, capturing the flicker in their eyes. while shots with his parents are pulled back, as though filmed through a fogged pan. The music is restrained, silence pervading where it out, with electronic beats surfacing only at parties, anchoring attention instead on expressions and breaths. The final scene is the film's crowning touch. Vlad utters an utterly ordinary line to Enzo, devoid of a poetic flourish, yet brimming with heartfelt longing. Such is youthful attention. It rarely needs to shout. More often, it lingers quietly in the everyday. Watching it, I was reminded of my own adolescence. I often imagined having an older brother or mentor figure to look out for me. In hindsight, it was naive, but at heart, it was a yearning for belonging. Enzo's youth is not my youth, yet I understand his restless desire. If I were to choose one photograph to encapsulate my teenage years, it would be a class photo, a sea of faces, each with a story, though most remain unspoken. French coming-of-age films differ markedly from the Asian ones we know. French works resemble oil paintings, bold strokes, saturated hues, layered with dense emotion. Asian films, on the other hand, are like watercolors, clean, light, spacious, suffused with air. Enzo handles LGBTQ+ identity with candor, neither exaggerated nor reduced to a label. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian aspect offers more than exotic flavor. For international audiences, it may well stir reflections on war and peace. All in all, Enzo is a tender yet powerful film. It portrays that liminal state between maturity and adulthood, raw yet not hollow, moving without affection. For anyone drawn to coming-of-age stories or LGBTQ+ themes, I sincerely recommend it. Next, I want to talk about a film that really struck a chord with me, Plainclothes. This film is not just about the story of two men. It feels more like a mirror, blending desire, fear, identity, and the social climate of the time into one. It forces the audience to confront something very real, and at times rather painful. There is one scene that left a particularly strong impression on me. The first interaction between Andrew and Lucas in the men's lavatory. The dialogue is minimal, almost entirely carried by glances, subtle body language, and their awareness of the space around them. That combination captured the sense of secrecy and the unstoppable pull of attraction with such precision. While watching, I found myself holding my breath, my heart racing faster than usual, because that push and pull, the wish to get closer, but the fear of something going wrong felt so authentic. Many gay viewers will know this feeling well. When you meet someone attractive in a public place, your first instinct might be to approach, but the reason immediately pulls you back. Be careful, do not be reckless, keep your distance. In reality, if you were to meet someone like Andrew, knowing that he didn't want anything long-term, to be honest, if he was your absolute dream, many people wouldn't refuse, even if it was only a fleeting encounter. Personally, I'd be more cautious, especially if he had already made it clear that everything must be kept a secret. That is essentially his way of telling you from the beginning, do not expect anything more. The story is set in New York in the 1990s, when the gay community was under immense pressure. A key element in the film is the police use of entrapment operations. The cruelty of this is not only the legal consequences, but the psychological blow. You think the man in front of you is a potential partner, and in an instant, you realize he is there to arrest you. That reversal is not only shocking, it carries with it a deep sense of humiliation. The irony is that, in a climate of widespread homophobia, many in society even considered this kind of targeting to be perfectly justified. If this same story were placed in certain conservative countries in Asia today, Lucas' situation could be even worse. In East Asian cultures, family ties are very strong, and one person's choices often affect the entire family's reputation. That pressure can sometimes feel heavier than any legal punishment. Visually, the director alternates between VHS footage and surveillance shots. At first, it feels messy, even disorientating. But eventually I realized it wasn't only about creating distance. It also gave the audience the sensation of spying, as if we were peeking into these lives through a wall. This perspective makes the characters feel more real, not just figures on screen, but living people who might easily exist in our own circles. If I were to handle the timeline differently, I might use color coding instead. Black and white for the past, color for the present. That way, the emotional shifts would feel more immediate for the viewer. Turning back to the characters, as a gay man, I pay close attention to the distinction between desire and delusion. Desire is a natural attraction, a part of instinct. Delusion begins when you lose balance, when you become overly invested. Lucas truly crosses the line when he uses his professional position to intrude into Andrew's work and personal life. That is no longer ordinary affection. It is a failure to respect boundaries, especially knowing that Andrew wanted everything kept private. If the story were told from Lucas' perspective, I imagine his voice would carry a tone of nostalgia. His attachment to Andrew was obsessive, and even though it ended in disillusionment, he would still look back repeatedly at those short but sweet moments. To me, Plainclothes is both about an impossible romance and about the awakening of self-identity. Andrew is fully aware of his social and family circumstances. He has no plan for anything lasting. He only wants something secretive and brave. Lucas, however, becomes increasingly absorbed, his hopes rising higher and higher, until disappointment is the only possible outcome. Very often, we all need to learn to balance between desire and obsession. Sometimes keeping a distance preserves the sweetness for longer, because whether it is brief or lasting, in another person's life, most of us are simply passing through. Letting go of obsession, living in the moment, that may be the hardest lesson of all, but also the most important. Finally, the film we are discussing is Twinless. From the title alone, one can already tell it is related to twins, but the story goes far beyond the subject of twins themselves. To be honest, I didn't have high expectations before watching it, yet as I sat in the cinema, the more I watched, the more intriguing it became. It is the kind of intrigue that deepens the more one reflects upon it. Let me begin with a small anecdote. When the end credits finished rolling, I was still sitting in my seat. The first image that froze in my mind wasn't a grand scene, nor a climactic moment, but that shot of Dennis sucking Roman's toes. Don't laugh. This is not the sort of detail that just any queer film would dare to include. Without genuine emotion, such a moment couldn't be acted out. It wasn't a gimmick in the performance, but a direct and utterly raw intimacy. James Sweeney's portrayal in that scene, in my view, is one of the highlights of the entire film. For an instant, one forgets he is acting at all. Speaking of authenticity, it reminded me of a coincidence in my own life. I once really did meet a pair of twins, both of whom were gay, but I've never been in love with any twin who was gay. In other words, I've never experienced the kind of emotional displacement that Dennis undergoes in the film. Yet if something unexpected, like what happened with Rocky, were to occur, I imagine I'd feel guilty for a long time. The difference is that I'd very likely not intrude upon Roman's life. There are certain lines which, deep down, one knows mustn't be crossed, for the consequences would spiral beyond control. This, for me, is the pivotal moment in the film. Dan is lying his way into the grief support group. From that instant, events move irreversibly in a different direction. On the surface, it may appear that he does so merely to stay close to Roman, but underlying, it's a powerful emotional impulse. He is trying to fill the void left by Rocky's absence. The problem is that the way he attempts to fill it is not the right one. I particularly appreciated the meticulous details woven into this film. Take, for example, the Halloween party sequence. At the beginning, the screen is divided into two shots, one showing Roman in a social setting and the other showing Dennis. The two images move forward like parallel lines, each in its own world, and as viewers we too sense that distance. Gradually, however, the two frames merge into one, bringing Mercy, Roman, and Dennis into the same shot. That visual shortening of distance conveys the shift far more powerfully than any dialogue could. Another amusing scene comes when Dennis keeps running into twins one after another on the street. It feels as though the entire world is conspiring to remind him of Rocky and Roman. It makes the audience laugh, but beneath, the humor lies a psychological weight. That sense of loss can be stirred up even in the most ordinary casual encounters. If I were to change one character's choice, I'd wish for Roman to truly fall in love with Dennis rather than Mercy. That would have led the story along an entirely different path. Not a necessarily happier one, but emotionally more complex and thought-provoking. Of course, that is merely the what-if of an audience member. The road the director chose has its own integrity and completeness. Twinless is not the sort of film one forgets immediately after leaving the cinema. It lingers, with an aftertaste that creeps upon you gradually. Beneath its humor, its awkward situations, and its moments of transgression, one finds sincerity and tenderness. To me, it tells not only the story of Dennis and Roman, but also something about all of us, how, after loss, we instinctively try to hold on to something, even if the way we do so is flawed or crosses a boundary. If you have already seen Enzo, Plainclothes, or Twinless, perhaps you will recognize fragments of yourself in some of the scenes. If you haven't, I'd suggest giving yourself some patience, allowing the details of the film to seep in slowly. I'm Cloud, and I shall see you next time.